Hey, you guys glad you're here tonight? Last night of SMC. Glad you're here? A little bit? Okay, man, I hope you are. I hope God is doing some incredible things in your life. Hey, October 12th, 2011, it is a day that I will never forget. Okay, I remember that night, that particular night, my wife and I, we decided to go out to dinner and some drinks with some friends of ours in downtown Oklahoma City where we lived at the time, and we had a great night. Oh, yeah, we had some great night, just kind of spending time with friends, but about 11 o'clock, we were like, hey, it's time to get home. And so we'd actually rode, to the restaurant with another couple that we were friends with. So, we all, the four of us, we got up, we paid our check, we left the restaurant, and we started walking to our car, parked in the parking lot directly behind the restaurant. So we get out, we get to the car, I go around to the passenger side front door, I open the door for my wife, like the gentleman that I am. My friend, he goes around, he does the same thing for his wife, and while he is opening the door for her, I walk around to the front of the car, I go over, I open the driver's side door, I sit down, I shut the door, I pull my keys out of my jacket pocket, and just as I'm getting ready to put my keys into the ignition, I hear this blood-curdling scream coming from behind me. I turn my head just to see what's going on, and all I see is my friend Krista, who is 5 months pregnant at the time. She is screaming at the top of her lungs and swinging her purse at this 6'2" guy dressed all in black. I look a little closer and I see why she's hitting this guy. This guy has come up behind her husband while he was opening the door for him, put him in a chokehold, and is now dragging him behind the car. Now, what would you do in a moment like that? I'll tell you what I would have done, most likely up until that point in time in my life. Up until that point in time in my life, I had never been in a real fight before in my entire life. Okay, I was that guy, we all kind of know the guy that just, I would kind of get up in somebody's face, talk a lot of trash, wait for somebody to break us up before I ever actually had to throw a punch. I was a talker. I wasn't a fighter. But that night, on that moment, in that parking lot, something was different. Okay, something had changed. I look around, I'm seeing everything that's happening behind me, and I whip my head around to the front. I'm looking out of the front window of the car, and I kid you not, it is as if God himself were speaking to me. I hear this voice in my head say, Bryan, it's your time. It's your time. And so I fling open the door. I run to the back of the car as fast as I possibly can. By the time that I get there, this guy, he has drugged my friend behind the car, thrown him on the ground, is standing above him with his foot raised above his head, getting ready to crush his skull into the concrete. Well, just before he brings his foot down to potentially end my friend's life, I run after him, I lunge, I put my elbow in his chest, I spin him around, and I hit him in the face as hard as I possibly can. Dropped him, knocked him out cold, one punch. Amazing. He actually had two friends, two buddies who were there with him. They saw what happened. They just took off running. They took off and ran away. My friend gets up, and we're just kind of standing over this guy, waiting for him to get up, start kicking him if he wakes up. And we're just watching, and we see his eyes roll to the back of his head. We see blood just start to pour out of the skull. And so I get my phone, I call 911. I'm like, hey, we just got jumped. I punched the guy in the face. I think I might have killed him. They're like, don't leave. Don't leave. Stay there. And so we stay. He didn't die. Don't worry, he didn't die. And so the police showed up. Ambulance came. They hauled him off. He never woke up. It was amazing. The manliest thing I've ever done in my life. Now, why do I tell you that story? Other than it's an awesome story. And so, that up until that moment in my life, well, what changed? Like I said, up until that moment, I was always, I've never really been in a fight before. I was always the guy that was just talking. So what was different? What was different that night that took me from the person who was always just talking trash to the person who was finally willing and ready to throw a punch? Hey, well, like I mentioned, my wife, she was sitting in the seat next to me. Not only that, we had a 10-month-old baby at home. Man, for the first time in my life, in that moment, in that particular situation, I finally, in that moment, had something in my life that was more than just worth living for. For the first moment in my life, I had something in my life that was worth fighting for. So I jacked that dude up. I broke my hand, but I broke his face. And so that was the night. And so, man, I want to ask you guys a question tonight. Here's a question we're going to try to answer. Do you have something in your life that's worth fighting for? Do you have something in your life that's worth fighting for? Hey, are you just living? Are you just living? My freshman year of college, it was over 20 years ago, but I remember heading into my freshman year of college, similar to kind of like Brent talked about this morning. Man, I went to college with one goal and one goal only, okay? I wanted to have as much fun as I could possibly have, so in order to help me reach that goal, I joined just one of the crazier fraternities on our campus just so I could have that full college experience, and I'll be honest, it didn't disappoint. Man, I just kind of dove right in. I kind of dove headfirst into the party scene, and I had partied a little bit in high school, but man, these guys were professionals, okay? I mean, they took it to a whole new level, and I was having a lot of fun, and it was great. My freshman year, I was dating this girl who was just way out of my league, okay, way out of my league. She probably wouldn't have given me the time of day if I hadn't been in this fraternity. And beyond that, man, I had 40 guys in my pledge class, 40 guys who I thought were, until this morning, some of my best friends. Man, some of my best friends, people that I could do life with. I wasn't wandering around campus trying to find someone to hang out with. I mean, I could not have scripted my first month of college to go any better. Okay, fun, the female friends, man, I had it all within that first month of college. I had everything that I wanted. And it was great for a minute. But as people have talked about, and I'm sure if you guys have experienced, as the semester wore on, and as night after night, honestly in my case, of just not being able to fall asleep at night. Night after night of not wanting the party to end because I didn't want to go back to my dorm room and be alone with my thoughts. Man, throughout that semester, I realized something. Man, I'm just living. I'm just living. I'm just staying alive. Man, I had things in my life that were worth living for, but what I was missing, what I desperately needed was something in my life that was worth fighting for. I mean, do you guys have something in your life? Do you ever feel that way? Do you ever feel like, man, I'm just living. I'm just staying alive. Have the relationships, the parties, the academic achievements, the meeting your goals, pleasing your parents, seeing the world. Have they ever failed to live up to your expectations of what you thought they would bring in your life? Have you ever found yourself just disappointed? Disappointed in what it feels like this life can actually offer you? Do you ever feel like, man, I'm just living. I'm just staying alive. Or maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you're like, hey, I'm not just staying alive. I feel like I'm barely surviving. And I get that. Now, over the next 4 years, every one of you here tonight, you're going to make some really huge decisions. I mean, if you haven't already, you're going to choose a major. You're going to change it 2 years later. Okay, freshman, that's just what happens, okay? You're going to choose a major. You're going to graduate college. You're going to start your career. You're going to get a job. You're going to maybe get married, start a family. You're going to decide where you're going to live. I mean, you're getting ready to lay the foundation by which you're going to live your life. You're getting ready to make some 50-year decisions. And with all of life that's coming at you right now, with everything that's coming your way, how do you make certain, how do you make sure that the choices that you make and the life that you live will matter. See, everybody in the world has something to live for. How do you make certain that you have something in your life that's worth fighting for? Hey, tonight we're going to look at a story in Acts chapter 9, okay? The book of Acts, it's actually a letter that kind of outlines the beginning and the early days of the church. And tonight we're going to look at the story of the most prominent leader in the early days of the church, a man named Saul, a guy who eventually becomes the Apostle Paul, who Bryan talked about last night. And we're going to see his story tonight. We're going to find Saul as a man who had everything in his life to live for. But then he's going to have an encounter with Jesus. He's going to transform his life, and Jesus is going to give Saul the one thing in his life that he was missing. He's going to give him something in his life that's worth fighting for. Hey, I believe he wants to do the same thing for every one of you tonight. So let's look. How do we find something in our life that's not just worth living for, but also worth fighting for? As we pick up the story, Luke, he's going to introduce us to Saul. Okay, let's see what he's up to. Acts chapter 9, beginning in verse 1, it says, "Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples." Everywhere Saul went, he was threatening the lives of followers of Jesus. It says he went so much so that he went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the way is what they called Christians in the early part of the church. They weren't called Christians, people that followed the way. So if he found any there who belonged to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. This was Saul. Okay, Saul, he was the biggest proponent, the biggest leader in the arrest, torture, persecution, and murder of Christians. Okay, it's really hard for us to comprehend how much a first century Christian, how they viewed Saul and how much they feared him. Okay, he was their greatest enemy. In the mind of a first century Christian, Saul, he was Hitler. He was Bin Laden. He was a Kardashian, just like the worst of the worst. Okay, that was Saul. That was Saul. And so as we're about to find out, Jesus, even though that's who Saul was, he had plans for Saul. On his way to Damascus to track down and arrest more followers of Jesus, Saul, he comes face to face with the very person he's been trying to stomp out. Verse 3, it says, "As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him." It actually ended up blinding Saul. A light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Saul responds, Who are you, Lord?" Saul asks. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting," he replied. So this bright light, it blinds him, it knocks him to the ground, and Saul comes face to face with Jesus. See, at this moment, Saul's worst fears, they've just come true. He realizes that he has been wrong about Jesus. He's been on the wrong side. At this moment, God has crushed Saul. But he's not finished with him. Jump down to verse 10. It says, "In Damascus, where Saul went to arrest Christians, there was a disciple named Ananias." We're introduced to this new man, Ananias. "The Lord called to him in a vision, 'Ananias.' 'Yes, Lord,' he answered. The Lord said to him, 'Go to the house of Judas on Straight Street.'" They had real creative names for streets back then. "Straight Street, and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul, for he is praying. In a vision, he has seen a man named Ananias, come and place his hands on him to restore his sight." To which Ananias says, "Excuse me? Do you know who this guy is?" Verse 13, "Lord," Ananias answered, "I have heard many reports about this man and all the harm he has done to your holy people in Jerusalem. And he has come here with the authority from the chief priest to arrest all who call on your name. He's come here and he's looking for me." Guys, listen, at this point in the first century of the church, the word was out on Saul. Okay, the word was out on him. His reputation had preceded him. Saul, he wasn't a man that Ananias or the early Christians, he wasn't someone that they even wanted to be around, let alone someone that they actually thought that God could use. In the minds of Ananias, in the minds of the entire church, Saul, he was damaged goods. He was damaged goods. You know, I actually work at a church now, which just blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind. I can't believe that they even let me in the door, let alone that they would actually pay me to work for them. So a little bit, I've kind of did some stuff. For example, my freshman year of high school, okay? My freshman year of high school, I was struggling in my Spanish class, okay? Now, we've been there. A lot of you out here, you've struggled in a class before. Now, if you were struggling, in a class, what would you do? Maybe, study a little bit harder. Go talk to your teacher, your professor, ask for help, maybe get a tutor. Hey, all great ideas. All great ideas. Well, I decided, my 15-year-old self, I'd go a little bit of a different route. So my dad was my high school principal, which wasn't ideal for a lot of situations. But one thing that came with that is he had a key. He had a key to our school, a master key to everywhere in our school. So in order to kind of boost my Spanish grade, I thought I'd do a little breaking and entering. Okay, so whenever at night, I would take my dad's key, I would go sneak up to our school, I'd break into our school, I'd break into our Spanish teacher's classroom, and this is like mid-90s, okay? It's before like teachers had computers on their desk. And so they would literally just write your grades in a book. So I went to my Spanish teacher's desk, I pulled out her grade book, and I just changed my grades. A 60, yeah, you appreciate a 60 became an 80. A 45 became a 95. Literally, the only reason I passed Spanish in high school was because I broke in and I changed all my grades. Listen, it was no bueno. No bueno. Only phrase I learned that entire year. But I was a liar. Listen, I would lie just to see if I could get away with it. The summer that I turned 18, I got drunk or high 35 days in a row. Some of you have lived that life. It's called rush team. We know. And that was my life. From the ages of 16 to 20, I had sexual experiences with women. And guys, this is where it gets weird the older you get. I had sexual experiences with women who are now married to other men. Man, decisions that I still regret to this day. Listen, I have lied to my closest friends. I have deeply hurt people that I love. When I was sitting where you're sitting, the word was out on me. And when people heard my name, they knew what to expect. My reputation had preceded me. I was damaged goods. I was damaged goods. And listen, I know a lot of you here tonight, you feel that way. You feel like damaged goods. And hopefully over the past couple of days, it started to shift a little and it started to change a little. And I know a lot of you stood up when JP talked the other morning, and it's incredible. And I hope that maybe at this point you're like, man, maybe, just maybe God might forgive me. He might forgive me. But surely that's got to be the end of it, right? Surely he can actually have plans for my life. Not after all the mistakes I've made, not after everything that I've done. I'm damaged goods. Hey, so how does Jesus view people like Saul? How does he view people like you and me? Verse 15, but the Lord said to Ananias, go. Hey, I know all this, but go. This man is my chosen instrument. This man is my chosen instrument. Okay, he says, hey, Ananias, I understand. Listen, I know this. It's nothing new. I know who Saul is. I know what he's done. But Ananias, you're looking at this all wrong. Listen, it doesn't matter what a person is. What matters is what a person can be. Listen, Ananias, I choose Saul. I'm going to change him. I'm going to make him into a brand new person. A person I can use. Several years ago, my wife and I had the opportunity to live in India for a little over a year. Where's Fayetteville, Arkansas, people? Where are you guys at? You guys know Wright's Barbecue? Yes, I lived there. This has nothing to do with the story, but I lived there with the founder of Wright's Barbecue. It was incredible. And so we had the opportunity, great food. We had the opportunity to live in India for a year. And while we were there for that year, for Ashley's birthday that day, I decided that I was going to take her out to this really nice, really elegant Indian dinner. Now, like most, Indian food, especially Indian food in India, it was really spicy, but it was also really good. It was just this incredible meal, or so we thought. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm laying in bed, and I wake up to the sound of Ashley just violently throwing up in her bathroom. I wake up, I'm pissed. I'm like, what's going on here? And I look, and I see this light coming out of our bathroom. I'm like, well, we're married. I should go see what's wrong, make sure that she's okay. And so I walk to the door, get ready to open it, and I'm telling you, nothing could have prepared me for what I was getting ready to see. I open the door, and there's my wife of a little over a year. We've been married a little over a year. She is sitting on the toilet, doing what you would do if you were on the toilet having just eaten really spicy food. She is sitting on the toilet, but not only that, her head is between her knees in a trash can, throwing up. I mean, it is coming out both ends at the same time. I didn't even know girls pooped until I got married. Apparently they do. Sometimes it's projectile. And so, man, it was nasty. I mean, I have never seen anyone that sick before in my entire life. So I'm sitting there. She's here, by the way. You can find her after this. And so I was sitting there, watching all of this play out. And eventually, once Ashley is just like, everything has left her body, okay? I mean, she's thrown up everything. Everything has left her body. At this point, she is so exhausted that she can't even stand. Okay, she just kind of slides off the toilet and just passes out in the middle of our bathroom floor. So I'm standing there, I'm looking at my wife. Here she is, she's passed out, sweating, covered head to toe in her own vomit. I'm like, man, I've got to do something. I need to help her get cleaned up. Now in India, we had in our bathroom, we had a bidet toilet, okay? And so, there's different types of bidets. This is the one that had the water hose attached to the side of it. And so I'm standing there, I'm like young, newly married. I'm like, sick wife, dirty wife, toilet water hose. This could work. This could work. I walk over. I grab the bidet. I walk over to my wife, passed out on the floor. I point it down. I turn my head, I'm saying, I love you, babe. And I just start hosing her down in the middle of our bathroom floor. There's some terrified looks on some girls' faces right here. And so, hey, welcome to marriage. But hey, I got her clean. Now, guys, listen. Obviously, I did not do that I did not do that. I made that up. Listen, I did not spray my sick wife with the water hose, with toilet water. I'm not a jerk. Okay, I didn't do that. Yeah. What did I do? I mean, I love her too much to treat her that way. So what did I do instead? I laid down on the floor next to her. There's more. I laid down on the floor. I got a wet rag, and I started to clean her up. I washed her hair. I changed her clothes. I picked her up. I carried her to our bed. I laid her on our bed. I put her head in my lap, and I just petted her. Yeah, I petted her until she fell asleep. Why did I do that? Because on October 15th, 2005, I chose her. So nobody just pushed her on me. I didn't reluctantly take her as my bride. On that day, I made a choice to be Ashley's husband. I made a choice for her to be my wife. And in that moment, when she felt disgusting, when she was at her worst, I wanted her to remember that I chose her. I chose her. Listen, it doesn't matter what the record is on you tonight. Jesus will take you. He won't just take you, he'll choose you. It's not something that he does reluctantly. What that means, it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter what sin you have hidden deep in your heart. It doesn't matter what words have ever come out of your mouth. It doesn't matter how you treated your parents or how many people you've hurt in your life. It doesn't matter who you've slept with. It doesn't matter how many people you've slept with. It doesn't matter what you've stolen, how much you've cheated, how many lies you've told. It doesn't matter if you crossed a line that you thought you would never cross. It doesn't matter who you are. What matters is who you can be. If you want him to. If you trust him to. Jesus will choose you. He will change you. He will make you into a brand new person. A person that he can use. Jesus, he made Saul a brand new person, but why? Why did he give him this new life? The rest of verse 15, but the Lord said to Ananias, go, this man is my chosen instrument. Why did I choose him? To proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. Listen, Jesus tells Saul, listen, I choose you because I want to use you. I want to use you for my purposes. Listen, I want to use you to proclaim my name. Saul, listen, I want to give you something in your life that's worth fighting for. I want to give you purpose. I want to give you purpose. So how does Saul respond when he receives this new purpose from God? Jump down to verse 19. It says, Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. At once, he began to preach in the synagogues. The synagogues, it's interesting, the synagogues is where Saul used to go to arrest Christians. Okay, now he's going back to his old stomping grounds. He goes back, begins to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is the Son of God. All those who heard him were astonished and asked, hey, isn't he the one who used to raise havoc in Jerusalem among those who call on his name? And isn't the whole reason he's here in Damascus in the first place? Hasn't he come back to take them as prisoners to the chief priests? Listen, Saul, he gets this new purpose from God. He starts preaching and people start talking. They're like, well, they comprehend what they were seeing. It's like, whoa, 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 isn't this like, like this is the guy that used to like kill Christians? Man, they couldn't understand what they were seeing. This was a new person with a new purpose. And everyone could see it. Listen, Saul didn't blend in. Man, Saul stood out. He stood out. I kind of referenced it a little earlier, my freshman year of college. Man, when I was just doing everything within my power to make an absolute mess of my life. Well, eventually, like a lot of you have experienced, I just kind of got tired of it. I was like, man, I wanted my life to change. I wanted it to go in a different direction, so to speak, but I didn't know how. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to turn. Man, I had some friends. I had, other fraternity brothers. I had some buddies from high school, but they weren't any help. They were in just as bad a shape as I was. And it seemed like all across my campus, everywhere I looked, everywhere I turned, all I saw was a bunch of people living out a different version of the same old story on repeat. Man, people's lives, it kind of blended in. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go for help. But thankfully there was one person I met my freshman year whose life stood out. Brandon Grissom. Brandon, he was the first person I met on campus who was really trying to follow after Jesus. I mean, he was following after Jesus in a way where it actually made a difference in his life. And throughout the course of that year, I got to know Brandon Grissom, or probably a more accurate way to describe it is Brandon Grissom got to know me. Man, he would always just show up in my dorm room to hang out with me and my friends. He would sit next to me in the cafeteria. He would invite me with him to go late night to study. Man, he just kept finding ways to insert himself into my life. Brandon, he went to every party that we had. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't trying to hook up with girls. He just lived a different life than the rest of us. And the thing that just really stood out about Brandon is he would continually, graciously, compassionately, faithfully talk to me about this relationship that he had with Jesus and how that experience impacted his life. Listen, my freshman year of college, it was over 20 years ago. And because of Brandon Grissom, because of one person who lived life with purpose, who had something in his life worth fighting for, not only did I start to follow Christ, but today, 20 years later, and this is a big statement, and I've thought about it, and it is true. 20 years later, there is not a single aspect of my life, not a single solitary aspect of my life, 20 years later, that has not been impacted for the positive, because there was one person on my campus who decided to live a life that didn't blend in, but he lived a life that stood out. So the question I want you to think about, hey, does anybody even notice you? Do people notice you on your campus? Do they even know who you are? Do you live a life that blends in, or do you live a life that actually stands out? Listen, if you're the guy here who can always be counted on for a good time at the party, if you're the girl here and you're going to graduate with a 4.0 and perfect attendance, if you're the person and you're going to have, you've got all of your ducks lined up in a row, you've got the job set up, you've got, this is who I'm going to marry, you've got everything in line, ready to go. And it's not that there's anything wrong with those things in and of themselves, but if that is all that you are, if that is all that you accomplish, if that is the only thing that you do, let me let you in on a little secret. There have literally been thousands of men and women on your campus just like you before you. And there will be thousands just like you when you're gone. Men and women that nobody notices, that live lives that don't really make an impact, people that just blend in. So how do we live a life that doesn't blend in, but stands out? Hey, pay attention right here because it's our last verse. We're going to see Saul living his life for something worth fighting for. Verse 23, it says, after many days, that phrase many days, it actually represents a time period of about 3 years. Okay, so after 3 years had gone by, there was a conspiracy among the Jews to kill him, to kill Saul. But his followers took him by night and lowered him in a basket through an opening in the wall. Hey, so what do we see? What do we see in Saul's life? What is there that he didn't have 3 years ago other than people trying to kill him? Followers. He had followers. That phrase followers, it's a Greek word, mathetes. Mathetes, it can be translated, it literally means to be a learner or a student. And it's translated in a lot of other places in our Bible as the phrase disciple. It's the phrase disciple. You see, for the past 3 years, Saul, he's not just been sitting around. He's been busy. He's been fighting. He's been spending his life, investing his life, making disciples. And I imagine it looked a little something like this.
Logan, is he hopping on?
Yeah, I had to resend him the link. He's
Okay.
getting on right now, though. What does it say? He's waiting. There he is. Oh, look at him arms.
Whoa.
Good night. I should have worn my freaking cutoff. Dude, good night.
I was a first generation college student, so the only thing I knew about college was honestly what I'd seen on TV. And because that's what I was expecting and looking for, that's exactly what I found. I began to wonder and question. I was like, man, OU's a big campus. I'm in Oklahoma. I know there's Christians. There's good people around here somewhere, you know? I was like, I know there's going to be good influences somewhere, but I didn't know where to look. Basically what happened was I was like, all right, I'm going to start reading my Bible again. And it was super crazy that around that first time, or around that time that I started reading again, I ended up meeting this guy named Cooper. And as I got to spend more time with Cooper, just further deepen my relationship with Christ, I started to meet all these people that Cooper had poured into before, and I was like, wow, there's guys that Cooper met, just like he met me, and now they're off doing the same thing. I'm starting to see this like trickle down, and I was like, it was such a cool thing to see, just through Cooper's faithfulness to the gospel and telling other people what a relationship with Jesus looked like, that he was able to go and make other disciples, and that multiplication process just continued to take place. The first time I did get to share the gospel was, like I said, within my fraternity house. It was that August or September. It was right after Rush. We have all of these new guys fresh out of high school coming in. And so it was through Rush that I got to meet Logan.
Yo, what's up?
What's up, big guy? Logan's personality and my personality are the complete opposite. I was like, me and Logan would not get along. I was like, no, I know about Logan is that we like similar country artists, and he likes to fish and hunt. And I was like, it's the only thing we have in common. Other than that, I was like, I don't know if I could be friends with Logan.
If I could like correct Will, maybe just like a little bit. Here's the thing. I think Will knew immediately that we were gonna be friends, but he just didn't, like, he hated how much he loved me off the bat. You know what I mean? He was scared of those emotions, but I knew the whole time. As soon as I met him, I was like, this is gonna be my guy. He just treated me so well, and he treated me different than everybody else, because when I came into ATO, he was the only guy in Rush that had asked me about faith, like about what I believed. And I was like, dang, that's kind of different. In my head, being a believer was all about head knowledge. Like, that's how you got salvation. The more you know about God means you are a better Christian. And so he kind of walked with me through that entire year, and I just got to watch how he lived his life different than everybody else. Because I said I was a Christian, but my life looked no different than the guy in my fraternity that said he did not believe in God. I know how broken I was. I want to make sure no one ever walks down the same path that I walked down. And that is when I learned, I was like, this is why I want to reproduce my life. Because Valdez took a step of faith in me, and he cared for me, and he loved me, and he shared God's truth with me. And I would not have eternal salvation if it wasn't for his risk that he took. And I was like, man, I want to do that for someone else because Valdez did that for me. This guy.
What's up, YouTube? So as a young freshman boy, I go to the University of Oklahoma. I decide I want to rush a fraternity. And really the turning point for me was through observing the lives of guys like Will and Logan who, like me, claimed Christianity, but unlike me, actually followed Jesus. And I really admired the way that they lived with purpose. So that was one. I was just searching for meaning in life, searching for purpose, wanted to give myself to something. And then why disciple making as opposed to anything else, right? Like we all give our life to something. Why disciple making? I think it just became clear to me as I began to think through the life of Jesus that he could have chosen any means to win the world. And what he chose, his strategy was to make disciples. And so, I mean, I could try to do this thing my way and it would probably be an epic failure, or I could trust Jesus knows what he's talking about and try to hop on his team and do it his way. And that's kind of what I have been trying to do since.
Whoa.
What up, Booth?
What's up? Big guy.
Dude, Luke, have you ever met Will before?
I've never met Will, no. Nice to meet you, Will.
Yes, that's what you
I think it definitely it helps having guys that have gone before me, that I have seen them share their faith and disciple guys and be really bold in identifying with Christ in the fraternity. And so I think it's just it makes it so much easier that it's I don't have to do it by myself.
It's nothing that I did. I'm not responsible for any of that. The only reason that I was able to love and the only reason I was able to tell people about Jesus is because he first showed those things to me. The only reason that I'm able to continue to show grace is because Jesus showed me what those things looked like. And it's only because of him that all of us have relationships, with God. And so I don't want to steal any of that spotlight, but it is absolutely amazing to see what being faithful to Jesus can result in. You look at 4 individuals right here whose lives are changed forever because Jesus took our place and died on the cross. Because the only thing that we're truly deserving of is a sinner's death, and he took that place for us. So it's nothing that I did. But it is awesome to get to see this picture being painted.
Yeah, in light of the guys that have come before me, I want my life to be a life that's marked by love for Jesus, I think, first of all, and out of that love, kind of an overflow into others. And I want my life to be reproduced in other people. I can have the same impact on others as these guys have had on me. It's my eternity that hung in the balance, and so it's the same for others as other people's eternities hang in the balance, and so that's about as important, as high stakes as it can get.
Man, I love that. I love that. That's exactly what Brandon did for me. He taught me to start following Christ, and he discipled me. Taught me how to read my Bible, how to pray, how to memorize scripture, how to share my faith, and train me to the point to where I could pass that down to others who could pass it down unto others. Listen, do you want to know, how do you have something in your life that's worth fighting for? You embrace a purpose from God. Okay, you embrace a purpose from God that impacts people outside of you and leaves a legacy that outlasts you. Embrace a purpose from God that impacts people outside of you and leaves a legacy that outlasts you. You make disciples who make disciples who can make disciples. Guys, listen, if you're a Christian tonight, here's the point. If you are a Christian, you are a new person with a new purpose. You're a new person with a new purpose. God, he chose you because he wants to use you. He wants to use you for his purpose. You're a new person with a new purpose. His purpose for your life is to make disciples who make disciples who make disciples. You're a new person with a new purpose. So hey, how do you do it? How do you begin to lean into this new purpose from God? Real quick here, wherever you're at, this is the first step. If you want to lean into that purpose, the first thing that you have to do is you have to ask for help. You have to ask for help. Listen, you cannot make a disciple until you are a disciple. You need to ask someone to disciple you. Real quick, here's 3 quick things to look for when you're asking for someone to disciple you. Number 1, find someone who's older. Okay, you need to find someone who has more life experience than you. 2, find someone who's bolder. Okay, someone who consistently shares their faith. They're leading people to Christ. And 3, I can't think of a better way to say it, just find someone that's better. Okay, let's just face it, there's people out there, they're just better Christians than you. Okay, they just are. They know their Bible better than you. They pray with more consistency and perseverance than you. They're better witnesses for Jesus for you. They have better character than you. It's just, look for that type of person. Find them and ask them to teach you. Have some high standards for your life and ask someone for help. Hey, as we close, JP mentioned this a couple days, like the first night, and I have just not been able to get this out of my head. And so I just want to put it to the test, okay? So we're going to do a little experiment as we close. I want to test out what he said. So right now, I just need everyone to stand up. Okay, stand up where you're at, stretch your legs, we're about done. I need a little experiment from what he said the first night. Okay, if you're here tonight, and you can tell me the first and last name of both of your parents, stay standing. Okay, easy one, we're all here. Hey, if you're here and you can tell me the first and last name of all 4 of your grandparents, stay standing. Okay? Hey, if you're here tonight and you can tell me the first and last name of all 8 of your great-grandparents, stay standing. If not, sit down. Man, they all almost, there's a few right here. They all come down. Man, JP said, your great-great-grandparents you'll forget. I was like, I don't even know my great-grandparents. Everyone else sit down if you haven't already. I have a 10-year-old son. His great-grandmother, my grandma, died 2 weeks ago. If you tracked my 10-year-old son down today and asked him her name, I guarantee you he wouldn't be able to tell you. He's already forgotten her. Think about that. In 3 short generations, our great-grandparents have already been forgotten by the people in their own family. You know, JP kept talking about your 76 years. 76 years from now, we'll all be gone. Unless Jesus comes back 100 years from now, we'll all be dead. And whenever that day comes whenever that time comes for you, here's the reality. No one will remember your name. And no one will visit your grave. That's the best. Ultimately, that's the best that this life can give you to live for. Or, just like Saul, just like the people we saw in this video, you can embrace a purpose in your life that's worth fighting for. You know, one person they didn't show in that video that they could have was Brent Rinke, our speaker from this morning. Brent actually led to Christ and discipled Cooper, who led to Christ and discipled Will, the first person we saw in that video. Or they could have put Stephen Click. Brent talked about that story a little bit today. I remember I was there 15 years ago when Stephen Click shared the gospel with Brent at a Wendy's at the Student Union, and OU led him to Christ. And Stephen faithfully discipled him for the next several years. Or they could have shown Brent Orr. Brent owns a restoration company in Oklahoma City today, but over 20 years ago, as a Kappa Sig at the University of Arkansas, Brent leaned into God's purpose for his life, shared the gospel with Stephen Click, led him to Christ, and discipled him. Listen, I bet no one in that video that we watched has ever met or has probably ever heard of Brent Orr. But their lives, and honestly, more than you realize, the lives of several of you in this room tonight, and the lives of the countless numbers of men and women whose lives will be changed for eternity after them, owe everything to the fact that men and women like Stephen Click and Brent Orr made a decision to lean in to God's new purpose for their new life. Listen, if you're here and you are a Christian, if you are a follower of Jesus, even if it just happened last night, you are a new person with a new purpose. God has chosen you to live a life that doesn't blend in, to live a life that stands out. Jesus, he has given you something in your life, more than just something to live for. He's given you something in your life that's actually worth fighting for. Hey, as we pray, I just wanted to read you guys one sentence, okay? This is one of the last remaining recorded words we have from Saul. Okay, Saul, as a man in his mid-60s, okay, he's in prison. He's getting ready to have his head chopped off for following Jesus. Saul, now known as the Apostle Paul, wrote these final words to his young disciple, Timothy. He says, "For I am already being poured out like a drink offering." Hey, I'm at death's door. And the time for my departure is near. But Timothy, don't worry about me. For I have fought the good fight. Father, I pray that all of us in this room, just as Saul was able to say at the end of his life, Lord, I pray that we would be people who could say that we lived a life, we had something in our life that was worth fighting for. Father, I pray that just tonight you would give everyone here clarity of purpose. Lord, that we would know what it is that you've called us to invest our life in, Lord, that we would know that you've called us to make disciples who make disciples who make disciples. Lord, thank you that you didn't just leave us where we were at. You came, you saved us, you changed us, you made us into a new person. And you gave us a new purpose. Lord, I pray that we would be a group who would fight the good fight. Ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.